Hello, guys, and welcome to my first ever mock draft on the channel. I'm only going to be doing the first round. Maybe later down the road I will do more rounds and that sort of thing. I will, slight disclaimer, this is coming from somebody who doesn't really watch college. I'm not going to lie. So, some of the things that I guess I would say is that I'm going to bring my own sort of perspective. I'm not just going to go over and draft, who I've been seeing in other mock drafts. And I'm going to try to stay away from even watching that many other mock drafts, to be honest with you. Now, I obviously do know some of these players. Obviously, you hear about some guys through the grapevine and that sort of thing, through Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, when college games are going on, because I do follow obviously NFL guys, and they're going to, for the most part, they're going to follow college and NFL, but otherwise, I am going to have my own sort of takes on this. And I don't think I'm just going to go with what everybody else, has been kind of doing or saying. And I'm going to go with what my own hunch kind of tells me, about what these teams might need and maybe what sort of surprise picks they might make. For instance, the Titans, which we'll obviously, start off with, and forgive me if I already mentioned this, I'm not going to do any trades. I'm not going to do any trades right away. I think that you look at this and, there's the potential for trades to happen. The Tennessee Titans said they will not trade the number one overall pick, but they also said that they were going to go for a generational talent. And I think that there are, certain guys that, I see that I think, could do well. And I think that honestly with Tennessee, obviously they, a lot of people think they're just going to go QB, but I personally think that they might give Will Levis one more year to prove himself, just because this QB class that we have, it isn't one of the best QB classes. And next year, we have Archie Manning, and beyond that, I don't know very much, but I know that Archie Manning is, it already seems like he's going to be the number one overall pick, just due to the family that he comes from, having two guys come from that family that won multiple Super Bowls. So with that being said, I actually, bold take here. They said that they were going to go after a true generational talent. I'm actually going to make a kind of spicy pick here, and I'm going to go and say that they're going to grab Tetairoa McMillan here. I know it seems crazy, but I think that if you're looking at Will Levis, he played, he had some very back-breaking interceptions in a good number of games, but he did prove that he was a very good competitor. He's able to run. He has a strong arm, and he does make some pretty good passes from time to time. Now, I think that, if he had a little bit more help in terms of wide receiver, I think that he would have the potential to do better. And one could say also that his O-line was another reason of why he did bad. Now, it's not, McMillan is a 6'5", wide receiver that has the last two seasons had 130 targets each season, and he's gotten just below 1,400 yards each season. And he's 210 pounds. He reminds me, I haven't seen too much tape on him, but it's like a guy of that height and weight. It reminds me a little bit of Moss. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be Randy Moss, because that would be a very bold statement, but I personally think that he looks like he could be a generational talent, a mismatch nightmare on the field. And who, we haven't seen a wide receiver go number one in a while, and this is why I say maybe they would trade out of it, potentially down, a spot or two. But I really think that, the possibility of, them drafting a guy that is going to instantly upgrade that wide receiver room would maybe make this offense a little bit more dynamic, But now with the Browns, who I think it's definite that they draft a QB. The setback to Deshaun Watson and that sort of thing. And then it's like Cam Ward, if he doesn't get drafted by the Titans, we take this guy. We take the best QB on the board, and then you're moving on to the Giants. And I know that, Coach Prime has said that he doesn't want his kid to go and play, for the Giants. I'm pretty sure, but otherwise, I just don't see how they're gonna stop it. I don't think that this is gonna be a thing where he drops too far. This guy who, maybe he shouldn't have an average, draft placement of 4.6, but who else is gonna draft him? You look all the way down to, maybe the Raiders. The Raiders, maybe. But then that would mean they would have to likely trade up. And if I'm looking at the Giants, who in the world is my QB next year? You need to move forward with a QB. So I'm going to have Shadir Sanders going to the Giants. And then we get to the Patriots. The Patriots, a team that just hired Vrabel, and you look at, who's available, a team that really hasn't had a pass rush. I think it's kind of funny that they say running back, then wide receiver, then guard and tackle. Not so much guard and tackle because they definitely need those to protect Drake May. But I personally think that the way that Drake May played, I think he could get into a rhythm with these wide receivers. And we were kind of seeing it last year where he was clearly fitting in the tight windows and he was able to play probably better than most people thought. So who do they take but Travis Hunter? I think that if you're Vrabel, I think you can understand that, maybe Travis Hunter doesn't play DB really, that much, except for in specialty situations. I don't think there's no way that he plays both sides of the ball in the NFL in such a physical game. From what I've heard, he's a very, shifty guy. He's a very quick guy. And he's like that Swiss Army knife type of player that it's like could do a lot of things, well, or maybe even possibly above average. So I think that Travis Hunter goes to New England and they essentially go and they say that, hey, we need a guy. We need a guy, that's going to be able to kind of be dynamic, with within the slot and be that guy that, can be an easy drop-off pass for Drake May. Somewhat similar to what the Patriots did back when Vrabel was on the team and they were winning Super Bowls with Brady. And it's like they had Edelman and, guys like that and Wes Welker, and you essentially make Travis Hunter your kind of workhorse, and then you maybe plug him into specialty into the slot on defense and like blitz packages, and you do a number of things, to throw your opponent off. Because I'm sure Vrabel's going to bring kind of a unique brand of defense. Now, moving on to the Jaguars. I think the Jaguars, if you look at them, they were not really getting pressure last year. And it's like they moved, they signed, I'm trying to remember the guy, Eric Armstead, from free agency, and they had him on the edge. Now they're going to put him in the interior this year because they They obviously moved on, and I mean, but it's really wonky because obviously their head coach, had that interesting press conference. I'm going to try and overlook that, But I look at this team and I think that you just take, the best edge, available to put him opposite, Josh Hines Allen, which will be Abdul Carter. They go and they take an edge so that they can apply pressure off the edge. I mean, it says defensive interior here. The only reason why I think that is true is because they didn't have a marquee free agent interior and they played him on the edge. If they move him into the middle, I personally think that Armstead is going to be more than suitable for their interior, having played at a high level. Now we get to the Raiders. And I'm not going to lie, looking at this, O'Connell's not the answer. Minshew's not the answer. I'll be honest, I guess I can't even remember if Minshew is going to be on the team. I'm pretty sure O'Connell is going to be. But it's like, you look at this team and you look at, who they signed, Pete Carroll, and I personally think that what are you going to draft that you're really, really, really going to need? Because if we look at QB, you have Dylan Gabriel's your next best after, Shadir Saunders and Cam Ward were drafted. Because like I said, there's not a lot of QBs in this draft. And I think that they want Shadir Sanders, but I think they have to realize that they would probably have to trade up with him or make a trade with the Giants after they draft him. And then, Prime says, hey, he's not going to play in New York, but then you're still going to have to trade for him and you're going to have to give him something. Or they're just going to hold the rights to his contract and they're not just going to take a low ball. They're not just going to take a low ball offer and ship him out, type of thing. It's kind of unprecedented, but obviously Prime wants him to play for a certain kind of team because he's very opinionated that way. And I guess I don't blame him. I don't want him. I wouldn't want my son either if I had, a prodigy, to go to a team where his career essentially goes to die, which I wouldn't say that with the Giants. They drafted very well last year, but it's like nothing is certain. So looking at the Raiders, they say they need a whole lot of offense. I'm personally kind of thinking that I personally think that they need like a tackle to protect, and it's like if Shadir Sanders isn't on the board and they haven't traded or whatever else, I think they need to do a better job solidifying their offensive line, to be honest with you. I think it was one of their major issues last year. And it's been for years where it's like they can't really establish a run game. Even Josh Jacobs, who did well on the Packers last year, the year before he didn't do diddly squat on the Raiders because their O-line was just really, really, really bad. And I'm going to say this. I think that they go Will Campbell. I think that, it looks further ahead than like what you would think, for him. But it's like, I think they need a better O-line. What is a QB going to do if he's just constantly under duress? It is what my opinion is with that. And then we move on to the Jets, another interesting team that says we need a QB in a draft where there's hardly any QBs, And then defensive interior and DB. I find that really interesting. I mean, obviously they have one of their guys, Reed, going to free agency, who was a very good piece last year despite a very unsuccessful overall defensive unit. that had a hard time tackling and stopping the run, to be honest with you. And I still think that like they have a lot of talent. I'm not quite sure, I think that Aaron Glenn is going to have these guys playing very, very hard-nosed football. I doubt that they miss many tackles or they're not going to be playing. They're just not going to be playing, type of thing. This guy was one of my, things that was really annoying with the Lions is that they were such sure-handed tacklers, and there wasn't a lot of yards after the catch, or halfbacks creating, essentially getting dump offs and being able to get first downs off of it. Their linebackers were very tenacious and well coached on the Lions, so I expect him to bring that over to the Jets. And they do have the talent. They've had it for years now. And a couple of years ago, we were talking about how they were one of the best defenses. And I think that last year, the mojo was just wrong. And for the Jets, we all know this. Nothing was really going right. So it's like, what do they go with? I personally think that you look at this kind of team, and it's like, who do they go with? You could obviously go Mason Graham, the top marquee defensive interior, it's like, or you could go with something else. I do think that they really needed help getting pressure off the edge, to be honest with you. And it's like, I that's, honestly kind of where I'm leaning. I'm kind of leaning towards, that being the thing, but then I'm also thinking, of maybe Will Johnson. Maybe they do draft a guy who it's like is going to be 22 by the season start, but he is 6'2", 202 pounds, and that sort of thing. So, the trends, are up and down, and that sort of thing. But I do think this guy goes to the Jets, and there it is, You draft a Michigan man, to go to the Jets, and pair alongside Sauce Gardner, who I think is a good coverage DB, but he really needs to work on get tackling so he can show that he's, like a top overall DB in this league. Because you got guys like Patrick Surtain who are good tacklers, and Sauce Gardner just doesn't have that in his game, for how athletic he is. And then we get to Carolina. To me, it's funny that, their D-line and their DBs are their only needs on this team. Now, I agree that Bryce Young proved he, is maybe the guy that they try out for the next 1 or 2 years to see exactly what they have. But I personally think that I think that they really need, a wide receiver, and looking at the available wide receivers, obviously, we've got Luther Burden III, Emeka Egbuka, Matthew Golden, but these are guys that are falling deeper in the round. There are definitely a few guys, but it's like looking at this guy's a 5'11", 208 pound, and he's just over 21 years old. So he's going to be 21 next year. He's very, very young. I think that, this is a guy they plug and play into the slot, and obviously you look at the slot snaps, he got a lot of those, and that's kind of what they need, with who they drafted last year being a tall outside guy. This year, I think they go and they add a slot guy, and I think Luther Burden is your man. It seems a little early to be drafting him, but I think you need to give Bryce Young some more weapons. The only other kind of, player I was thinking of going was Ashton Jeanty, who to me, like, is a power horse back, and Chuba, with how inconsistent he's been, was kind of glowing up near the end of last year type of thing, but it's like he's also had injury problems, but looking at the Saints now at pick number 9, I think the Saints really need to start looking at who their edge pieces are. So I think that they go with James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee. You know, the supposed ninth best player in this draft falls right to where their pick is, and he can learn under Cameron Jordan, you know, since we all know that Chase Young is entering free agency this year, and they're going to need another edge and someone on a cheap contract, because we all know that, you know, Cameron Jordan's getting up there in age. It doesn't seem like it because he plays so well and tenaciously for his age, but it's going to be one of those things. Now, we get to this Chicago pick, and I'm not going to lie, I think Chicago's defense is just fine. I think that they don't really need to get anybody on defense. It's funny to me that they have this edge rusher thing right here at the end as their fourth need, but running back to me is a need. You hire Ben Johnson. What has he had on the Lions? He had Jahmyr Gibbs and Montgomery. Now, Montgomery is known as kind of as Knuckles, you know, the harder running back. But Jahmyr Gibbs runs just as hard, and you know, at times with it, he knows how to leverage his speed into tough running. So to me, you know, I've seen people having GT go later. I think he goes to the Bears right here. Because what do they not have on the team? You know, they got rid of Khalil Herbert, which was kind of their hardest runner, but they didn't use him last year. And then, you know, they signed Swift, who, you know, has a little bit of history having known Ben Johnson, but I think they're going to want to have someone who's a harder runner, you know, because Ben Johnson knows, you know, how much that can change the dynamic of an offense and make it easier on a young QB like Caleb Williams, who struggled last year, you know, and you want something to fall back on. And if you have a better run game, because to be honest, it wasn't, you know, it was terrible. Maybe you don't have the O-line that, to be honest, you know, people wanted to say that was the only reason Caleb Williams did bad, but it's like he was holding on to it too long. But it's like they were also passing it a lot, and you want to take some of that pressure off the O-line. So I think that the Bears take Ashton Jeanty, and, you know, they then look to their O-line in later rounds, potentially. Now, looking at San Fran, you've got guard, tackle, and then D-line. To me, I think that their secondary is kind of suspect. I think their D-line is honestly, it isn't bad. I you know, I don't know where this is kind of coming from. I think it comes from the fact that, you know, their offense didn't really click this season and their defense was on the field a lot. Purdy not playing very well. You know, guard, tackle, maybe. You know, Trent Williams is getting up there in age, but it's like you look at, you know, pick 12 and who do you have available? You have Josh Simmons. You have, you know, for D-line, you have Mike Green, and then you have Mason Graham. I do think they go Mason Graham here, you know, being the best player on their board at that point. And then, you know, we're on to pick 12. To me, the Cowboys, it's kind of interesting. They say they need running back. I think their running back, I'm trying to remember his name. I think he was doing fine, and they didn't really run it that much last year. You know, they didn't start really running it until later in the season when they were playing better after Dak was out, which is kind of funny. It's like, if Dak is playing and you take the pressure off of him, you know, I don't like him, but it's like, I think if you have a balanced running game and he doesn't have to throw to win you games, I think that's the way that is the formula for the Cowboys. And it's like, after this year, I think that running should be the formula for a lot of teams to kind of set their mind on and maybe get back to running the football. So looking at looking at, the Cowboys, I actually think that, maybe you do go with tackle. I think that your line is bad. I think you then go and you take Josh Simmons, kind of another potato where his rank is 12, and you're taking him, at this pick, and you're drafting this guy. Now we are on to the Dolphins, who it says need guard and tackle, and Josh Simmons and another tackle were taken off the board already. Obviously earlier Will Campbell, so you're maybe thinking like, we have got to protect our quarterback if he is going to remain healthy. So I honestly think that they're going to go and they're going to take Kelvin Banks here. I think that, I think it might sound strange, but the thing with what Tyreek Hill said, and then he said that, it was just a lot of emotion at the end of the game. This is where I want to be. You don't say stuff like that unless you really do somewhat think it. Like, there's just no way to me that he is completely happy and he said that, So it's like, in some wild world, I do think that they go and they grab, some weapon here, whether it be, Kelvin, whether it be Emeka Egbuka or Kelvin Banks Jr., looking at this, he's a 6'1", 205, height wide receiver, maybe not what fits with the team. Waddle, I think, is 6 foot, and then you got Tyreek Hill, who is, he can play outside or inside with his skills. But it's like, this is a guy that, maybe you could bring in and you could use, especially with the durability issues of the other guys. And it's like, if the more weapons you have with Tua, the more I think that, like, he has a very quick release. He can get rid of the ball very quickly. And it's like, the more weapons he has, he can really kind of disguise the weakness of his O-line. So I'm actually going to be bold, and I'm going to say they go and they draft a wide receiver because of the injury issues to Waddle and even a little bit to Tyreek Hill last year, and they draft a wide receiver, another weapon for their coach to use, and for Tua to throw the ball to. Now, looking at the Colts, I personally think that this falls right into their lap. I think that they take Tyler Warren, the best tight end in this draft, and they take him here. I think that they really need a tight end. I think the other wide receivers they have are good. Pierce, Pittman, and they give a guy like Tyler Warren, to whoever the quarterback is. I think it's going to be Richardson. I think they're still kind of, I think this might be the last hurrah for the GM and the head coach potentially. And they're going to try to get someone that's going to be an instant contributor, and they're going to draft Tyler Warren. Now moving on to the Atlanta Falcons. To me, they already have an offense that is good enough to win. They have a good enough O-line. They have good enough weapons. So they don't need anybody. They don't need anybody on the offense. I find it crazy that they have wide receiver here. But it's like they had a QB who was ultimately failing his team last year. And it's like, who knows if it was scheme? I personally think it was age, as well as, Kirk Cousins kind of reverting back to how he normally was and having to deal with the injury. And it's like when Penix came in, they were playing a lot better. He brought a lot more to the team. And I assume that Penix, he's definitely going to be the starter. I don't think there's any world where we see Kirk Cousins starting for this team again. Not to say he'll be off the team, but I don't think they need a wide receiver. I think they do need edge. I think they need pass rush. So they take Mike Green. They take Mike Green here for their edge, and then then the Cardinals, guard, tackle, and D line. The Cardinals, to me, could use a lot. I personally think that they could use, better safety play, better tackles potentially, even possible better DBs. But I don't think that your DBs are going to consistently do better with a better skill set without defensive interior or pass rush and that sort of thing. So with this pick, I am going to say that they actually take Mykel Williams. I was kind of leaning towards safety because I think they need safety help, a little bit of safety help, but I don't think anything gets solved unless they have a better pass rush, and then moving on to the Bengals. The Bengals, to me, yeah, you're losing Higgins. I think Burrow can do fine without Wiggins. I don't think he'll quite have the season he did, where if he had made the postseason, he would for sure be in the talks for MVP. But I think that, you obviously have Jamar Chase, who played out of his mind, last year winning the Triple Crown. And then you look at, even guys like Yoshi Vosh, the tight end, I'm trying to remember his name, but we haven't obviously seen these guys play in a number of weeks. But it's like, you look at this team, I personally think that it's like I think they need a running back more than they need a wide receiver. I think that Chase is a kind of guy that he's going to be more of a focal point. I think that, they're going to be able to do some things to really pull the defense towards Chase and get other guys open. I think that with Higgins, I think that, he was obviously a kind of security blanket option, but I think that this team really needs a good running back. The problem is that you don't really have anybody that is screaming, oh, we should get this guy at this point. The closest guy is Hampton, out, a Tar Heel, and then the next guy is a round 2 dude. So I don't think that really happens. But the other thing too, you need safety, you need better O-line. I think that they just go with Kelvin Banks Jr., the tackle out of Texas, and to better that O-line. Because what helps the run game and the passing game? A good tackle. So they move on to that. Now we go to Seattle. Who the heck knows what's going on with, this team? I think that they do need a better O-line. I think they need somewhat more of a pass rush, even though Leonard Williams was good, but he was slightly hurt at some times last year, because I think the guys they have on the back end are good enough. I think they have, good linebackers, good DBs. They do have linebacker as a need, but I think that, they're not as bad as, what might be seen, and that sort of thing, due to the fact that their line was kind of bad against the run as well. So I honestly see this, and I actually think that they go with a tackle. I think that they go with a tackle here, and I'm gonna say that they take Amand Membu. Maybe ahead of schedule. Probably in some world you see the Seahawks, drop out of this pick. If maybe one of these other teams really need a DB, or something like that. But then we get to the Buccaneers. Now, the Buccaneers, to me, they have a pretty good team. I think that with the style of play that they want, I think they go out and they get another freak to go and cover the top. And I think they take Malaki Starks. Malaki Starks, the best safety in this draft. And he's falling all the way to 19 just because of the way that safety to me isn't as valued. I think that the Buccaneers, make it a no-fly zone, and they make all these teams have to pass down low and shallow, and not give them the ability to throw deep so they can play a defensive-minded game, because that's the way that their coach is. He's a defensive-minded coach. Now looking at the Broncos. Obviously, protection was somewhat of an issue, but you also need more weapons for Bo Nix. So to me, you're looking here, the best wide receiver available apparently is Matthew Golden. I think that Golden doesn't really go this high, to be honest with you. And then it's like, do you get better protection and give these guys that they have on the team another year? I think that Marvin Mims really started to pop off and come into his own with better QB play this year, being the weapon that they thought he could be, a couple of years ago, but the whole Russell Wilson experiment derailed that, But it's like, who all do you need? I think the defensive interior is fine. So Walter Nolan is kind of off the board. Shamar Stewart, they don't need an edge. Jack Sawyer, obviously that too, and Kenneth Grant. Maybe they do go with Matthew Golden here. Obviously a 6 foot, gonna be 22, during the season type of thing, a junior. And it's like 195. I think another guy you can pair outside, with Cortland Sutton and Marvin Mims, I think that they go Matthew Golden here, to give Bo Nix another weapon, to give him someone else, to really connect with and develop with. And then now we get to Pittsburgh, who obviously had a disastrous end of the season, and I'll be real. I feel like this is a team that who the heck knows what they do. Who the heck knows what they do? DB was somewhat of an issue. They obviously need another wide receiver, and who knows if they actually do pull the trigger and trade Pickens or get rid of him. And what are teams going to be willing to take him, knowing his history? Ordinarily, I think that if Pickens is a sound guy and he's not the way he is, he stays on the team. But if he's not the way he is and he still wanted to be on a different team, you could maybe fetch a second overall pick for him. But with the way that he is, it's a little detestable. And I don't know if I would want to bring a guy like that who has a mouth, is so active on social media, and essentially sets a fire under your team to go out and ball against every team after this guy, antagonizes the other team on social media. What can you get for him? But it's like, you should be able to get you should get a wide receiver. But it's like last year, Joey Porter, who's your best corner, had injury issues. And, if you're keeping Tomlin, that he's really, kind of looking at this. Maybe you go for a guy who's as young as Morrison, is going to be 21 when, the season starts, played for Notre Dame, and it's like you take this guy, to pair in your DB room just because he's the best available, because I don't think that you take a wide receiver here, and then moving on to the Chargers. The Chargers, obviously, to me, they do kind of need a running back, wide receiver, tight end, edge, all these things, type of thing. And then you have Khalil Mack, who, is leaving in free agency. So to me, you look at this team and, their defensive interior isn't terrible. I'm trying to remember the guy's name, but he's a very good young player. But you take an edge. You take Shamar Stewart as a guy who it's like is ranked 20 at this point, and you need an edge player. And then we get to my Packers, who, of course, they say wide receivers in need. I'll be real. I heard about, the Josh Jacobs drama. I don't think it's drama. I think it's him being he's being brutally honest, which to me, I love. I personally think that you need some of that tough love at times. There isn't, and it's like he said, there's nothing wrong with the wide receivers on the team. They just need someone that's got a little bit more tenacity and proven ability, which is why, people are saying, oh, they'll trade for Metcalf. Oh, they'll sign Higgins, or Devontae Adams comes back, which I would accept, because I think Adams has one of those play sets that ages very well. He doesn't need the speed. He has great hands. And he has good route running. It's like, if you can create separation, you can always get yards. Simple analogy for wide receivers. And you don't need blazing speed. You just need, the ability to create that separation with your routes. So do the Packers go wide receiver? I kind of see it as, it wouldn't hurt. But there's a lot more wide receivers later in this draft. To me, I personally would want us to go with some sort of interior. And it's like, you look at, you look at the defensive interiors available. We obviously have Walter Nolan, who is, a very high overall PFF grade. 6'3", 305, 21 years old, fits in with the, young. I don't know if we're still going to be the youngest team in the league, but it's like that could potentially happen. Looking at Kenneth Grant, a huge guy at, a little bit older, not much older, type of thing, at 340 pounds. Perhaps this is, the key to make it that nobody can run inside on us. I actually, and then you look at, Tyleik Williams, another big guy at 21. There's a lot of defensive interior in this class, and they're all pretty young, obviously. Not sure why they don't give their age for this guy, but I personally think that, the Packers go big and they draft Kenneth Grant. They draft Kenneth Grant, who's a big-bodied guy, and, maybe they draft an edge rusher and a wide receiver in a later round. DB's obviously kind of is a thing, type of thing. But, you draft Kenneth Grant, pair him alongside, Kenny Clark, and you're going to have a very tough time running against 50 pounds of, defensive interior. Now moving on to the Vikings. Obviously, the Vikings, to me, their issue last year was that it seemed like their passing scheme kind of failed them. They really need kind of a running back. Guard, maybe an issue. I feel like that's kind of overstating it. Defensive interior, possibly. There were teams that were running on the inside of, their team. Stephon Gilmore, becoming a free agent, and, he was off and on with injury last year. So maybe DB, but looking at this, you really need, to me, a better run game, someone who's a true running back. Now, who better than to go after a guy who, he's going to be 22, but 6'1", 220-pound, pounder from, the halfbacks. You still have Aaron Jones, but, perhaps when you get to the goal line, you're not throwing it when you're within the 5-yard line and you have a guy who can pound it in. No offense to Aaron Jones, but he he can pound it in, but he's not, going to be able to fight through as many tackles. So I think the Vikings actually go halfback here. I think with the style of defense that they run, it's a little less imperative that they have as many serviceable DBs. And Flores obviously didn't leave. He didn't get hired by anybody. So it's like, really solidify your offense with a halfback that it goes around this range, doesn't necessarily fall to you, but is a big body pounder, kind of like, the closest I can think of, to this guy's weight and that sort of thing is AP as a previous Viking player. I'm not saying this guy's going to be it, but could potentially, rectify and make your red zone offense a little bit better. We saw it when they played the Lions. The Lions, as banged up as they were, they still were able to defend the pass, and it got very predictable. But looking at the Texans, they say they need wide receiver. I think this is because Stephon Diggs is leaving in free agency. Center and guard, I definitely think that they need to do a better job of protecting C.J. Stroud, and I think here that they do take, I think they do take, a lineman. So it's like looking at Gray Zabel, a tackle playing out of North Dakota State Bison, obviously going to be 23, was a senior, 6'6", a big-bodied guy. Also get your running backs running behind this guy. Joe Mixon, running behind a guy like this. Big, tall, strong build, lengthy arms, and just this kind of guy, to pair on the opposite side of Tunsil, Laramie Tunsil, to protect CJ Stroud and hope he returns a little bit more to form with better protection. Because as we all saw it last year, him and Caleb Williams both struggled because they had a lot of pressure. Now, I think that CJ Stroud, because in his first year, he wasn't pressured very much or sacked very much. But this year, and he just didn't know how to deal with the pressure, and it's like his line was definitely to blame for some of it, but then he also held onto the ball way too much. I am still, I'm thinking of that Kansas City game where it's like, it wasn't always his O-line. It was him holding on to it for way too long, to allow the 8 sacks on him. But moving on, we have the Rams. The Rams, to me, are probably going to load up on offense and defense a little bit. I think their defense really rebounded well last year. Obviously, Verse, who I think is, the favorite to me to win Defensive Rookie of the Year, but it's like you look at tight end, tackle, linebacker, cornerback. We don't know if Stafford is coming back either, but like I said, not a lot of QBs in this class, unless McVay, who is a genius, can grab one of these dudes in a later round and be like, yeah, this guy's our man. He's our starter, because I certainly wouldn't want it to be Jimmy G. I think he's proven that he can't be a Super Bowl winning quarterback. And it's like his last stint with the Raiders, man, was he missing footballs to Davante Adams, who had a 1,400-yard season the season before. And then you got Garoppolo starting, so, and I guess I don't know if he's a free agent either, but looking at the Rams, if they're going to trade Cooper Kupp, I do think they need a wide receiver. But we'll see. But I also think that you need better protection. I think that their O-line did kind of solidify and be a little bit better. But I think that you look at this, and I think that you take Walter Nolan, who's a rank 19 and can solidify your defense. And then you worry about DB and wide receiver in later rounds, which I think are their weakness. I think that their linebackers played great. I think that, it wasn't so much of a liability. I think their D-line needed to get better because sometimes they did get, I feel like they were off and on against the run, this year. Looking at the Ravens, so needs are wide receiver, tackle, edge, and CB. They are losing Stanley to free agency, and while he's been banged up, and I think they're willing to let him go, I think that that's something that will need to be addressed, because you want to protect Lamar Jackson. As elusive as he is, you don't want him having to do that every play, and essentially play a broken offense, where he has to be the improvisation king, every single play, because while he's, crazy athletic and whatever, that sort of thing can catch up to you later in the season, where it's like, one bad hit from running or not able to escape. But then it's like, I also think of their defense. I think that they needed to force more pressure on QBs. I think it kind of got to them when they played the Bills. They didn't get to Josh Allen enough. And it's like they were playing great. I think they played good enough defense in a sense, but it's like it's not like their defense was, it was so good they should have won the game type of thing. So it's like, I think that they take, an edge player, to be honest with you, and it's like, looking at this, you've got Sawyer, who's a 6'5", 260-pound, guy out of Ohio State. Why not? And he's going to be 23 years old, but hey, he's the best edge rusher on the board at this point. Now, looking at the Lions, they're another one that I feel like is going to go edge. And this is, to me, it's kind of a no-brainer. They say they need a center and a guard, and then edge and linebacker. I do think that their linebackers were injured last year, so that is kind of a minor need. But you go edge here, and you take Nick Scorton out of, Texas A&M. I'm sorry, I'm mumbling my words. Looking at Washington, what was the biggest issue to me with them was that, Jaden Daniels didn't have terrible protection, but I don't think he had enough weapons. But then you also look at, who's available at this point, and it's like the next highest wide receiver is Alec Ayamanor. So it's like, or Jack Beck, even lower down. And it's like, there's not a whole lot of guys right here. So looking here, what do we go with? We go with the ability to protect our franchise QB, and we take Josh Carnley Jr. out of Oregon. And now we're down, to the Bills. The Bills, to me, who it's like I feel like they need more wide receivers. I feel like, the defensive interior, I feel like Ed Oliver was doing well, but he could use some help. But they also need, linebackers and CBs. Matt Milano is great, but he wasn't helping. He did play well when he came back. A slight liability from some plays that I remember seeing, but still a very good linebacker, coming off of an injury. CB, definitely a need, and you look here, you've got, defensive interior, Tyleik Williams, cornerback, Jahdae Barron, and I think that they take Jahdae Barron. I think that he fits the mold, of a guy that, could play, outside. And while he's a senior and he's a little bit older, type of thing, I think that he's a dude who could, come in and play very well and play very spicy, for them. Being a very stocky, physical, small, shorter corner, but not too much shorter, to be honest with you. Moving on to the Eagles. To me, it's funny that they say they need a wide receiver. I think they just need a better scheme. And I think they need to have Hurts play with some urgency. I mean, to me, it's just kind of funny. You look at, guard and edge and then CB. CB to me, maybe kind of funny to me, but you also have Zach Bond going. You have Zach Bond going, in free agency, and then you also have, and that sort of thing. So it's like, maybe you do need a linebacker as well. And, we haven't had one come off the board. I do think that Demetrius Knight is kind of the guy that you would go with. A 6'2", 245 big physical linebacker, I think that this is who they take. I think this guy is the best that they could do right here with who else is available. You still have Dallas Goedert on the team, so it's like I don't think you go Colston Loveland, and that sort of thing. Now looking at Kansas City, I feel like it's impossible to determine what Kansas City will take because Super Bowl teams are weird. They see the seasons way ahead of where, they are and that sort of thing. And looking at Kansas City, what could they go with? I think that you look at their team and it's like you have, Trent McDuffie. You have Nick Bolton. He is leaving, in free agency more than likely. But then I also think about, the injuries to their wide receivers, and it seems to me like it could be a wild pick, but they could take a bigger bodied, or a taller wide receiver, that's not too tall, but it's like, could replace D-Hop and at a younger age and cheaper, of course. And I think that, they might take some random person like Alec Ayamanor, who isn't too random, but it's like, I think we see another first round, pick in this draft. So, looking at this, here's who I picked for my mock draft. If you guys want to see, I think that, little bit of randomness is always a little bit of fun with this. Well, once I start actually watching a little bit of, the tape, on some of these players, and looking at, a little bit more of what the teams might need with departures and that sort of thing, or how I think it's going to play out. This being my first mock draft, I'm definitely not too savvy on it, like I said, but it's like, I feel like, this is kind of sound per who I think these teams will go with, and my impression on this. So, looking at this, I'm pretty happy with this. But tell me what you guys think, who you would have these teams taking, or who you want your team to take, in the draft, and that sort of thing. I think that, this year's going to be really fun for drafts. I think there's a good, pool of players. I think it's going to be very interesting due to the fact that there's a lot of teams that want QBs or say they need QBs, but there's not that many QBs available, at least not to the, per what is projected, and that's not always saying that, a third round guy still couldn't make a difference, but you know, in the right system and with the right teachings. But, you know, we'll have to wait and see. So tell me what you guys think. And if you want NFL content like this, then, you know, let me know. But that's going to do it for the video. And as always, go Pack Go.